This is Johnny Dosco. Stay tuned for another Score Sheet podcast. Holy Kadelka.
Hi, and welcome to another Score Sheet podcast. I'm happy to say that today I have as a guest Nick Minnix. Nick is the managing editor at KFFL.com. They've been giving out fantasy advice for many years. You folks started with football, didn't you?
Yes, football in 1996, and added baseball a couple of years later.
And you're pretty much the guy that's in charge of the baseball side of it, aren't you?
Yes, that's correct.
Oh, by the way, hi, Nick.
Hi, how's it going?
It's good, and I'm glad to have you on. Nick is another person I was fortunate enough to see at that AFL conference a few weeks ago that Ron Chandler put on. So I'm happy to be able to see him here on a podcast. So what are you doing now for this time of year for the baseball side?
Baseball, right now we have a series going on. It's called Fantasy Baseball Hot Stove, and we basically just analyze, the goings-on of the off season. It's obviously as you mentioned, the AFL. I mean, some good stuff that happened there. We talked a little bit about Bryce Harper, and we're just dealing with trades and signings and winter ball, injury recovery, things like that. Just kind of giving folks a preview of what to expect as they come into draft season, and then we've been hot and heavy on our projections. We're rolling those out at the beginning of the year, so it's all preparation at this point in time.
Yeah, for people in the fantasy content baseball world like you, this is, it doesn't seem to some people maybe like a lot of stuff's coming out, but this is when you do all your back-end work for books or projection systems or whatever. It's probably about as busy as it gets, I would think.
Yeah, it is. It's really, this is about the busiest time. And it's because we're a dual sports site, with a big focus on football for us too. We devote some resources to that, and it really heats up for us at the turn of the year. But we've definitely picked up what we devoted to baseball. And it gets pretty intense at this time of year specifically because football is also so. This is playoff time in fantasy football, so there's a lot going on for folks, and a lot of people looking for that winning tip, the big advice that's going to put them in a championship or win them a championship. It gets pretty intense.
Yeah, it's pretty hard. I bet you can't just go to the football guys and say, "Hey, I need you to crunch some baseball numbers for me."
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sure they'd look at you and go, "What are you talking about?" Well, you guys provide content for a number of websites, don't you?
We used to. We used to provide to Yahoo and Fox Sports, but we kind of gotten out of that. We're basically kind of a standalone service, and we occasionally provide content to some other folks. And you can see our Hot Off the Wire on a number of websites nowadays. It's all over the web. So it's kind of varied as to what we offer now. We don't supply so much actual analytical content, but we do offer the news goes out in a number of websites, I should say.
The analytical stuff stays on KFFL.com.
Yes, most of it is with us now.
Huh. Well, that's good. But you get your name out through sending out Hotwire stuff and all that.
Yes, and that's the biggest draw. The news updates. People want to know things and they want to know it quickly, and that's kind of the moneymaker for us as far as that goes. It's a big draw. It's kind of one of the first things that people ask for when they come to us, and they ask for content. So that's easily probably the biggest thing for us.
Well, so moving on to projections, because that's what I think a lot of people are interested in. One thing I've asked a couple different people is their favorite stats to use for baseball projections. So do you have a couple that maybe one or two for hitters, one or two for pitchers that you really focus on?
The way I look at projections are, I try to take as much of a big picture view as possible of a player. There's so many things that go into kind of the projected outcome for, player's season. Strikeouts and walks, or strikeout and walk rates. That's obviously kind of the most basic indicative statistics that a lot of folks have used, and those are particularly strikeouts. I'm always kind of focused on strikeouts because it's an opportunity to limit at bats or limit balls in play, things like that. It's it's a quite a boon of a fantasy statistic in and of itself. We incorporate just the big picture view of a lot of things, like as far as how those things are affected by injury and team situations and things like that. And we try to put as much of a player's every season in a context as possible, so that we don't sell players short or at the same time don't I guess reward a player for excessive value. I mean, it's kind of I guess a long-winded process. I mean, I think that's the case for probably a lot of people when they do projections. It's a long research process, and it's there's subjectivity in it. No matter how much you subscribe to a statistical model, there's a lot of subjective work that goes into it. So, strikeouts for me is big. Walk rates are big for both batters and pitchers. I look at things like batted ball results. I mean, that's big for me as far as the quality of hits and things like that. That pitchers and pitchers and hitters alike achieve. I think some things matter more for some guys than others, and I think that's kind of the biggest thing. I mean, contact rate. Some of this stuff is more important, I think, to the projection of a hitter or a pitcher. Probably the biggest thing is just keep an open mind for it. So, but strikeouts and walks is probably easily the biggest thing.
But you're not wedded to one formula for every single player. You try to put a little more into it than that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think it's because it's not as simple as. I mean, you have so many examples of players who don't, fit the mold or fit the formula for, for instance, this, a kind of. Jonathan Sanchez is the guy we were talking about just a little bit earlier off air, and just he's a pitcher who has always kind of had that teasing fantasy upside, and he's put together this one great season in 2010, and it was a phenomenal season, but that's kind of the year that he put it all together. And this is a guy who's typically walked around 4 batters per 9 innings through the course of his career. And I think that it was just like a convergence of some luck factors that went into his average on balls in play was fantastic. And I don't so much subscribe to the theory that the league average on balls in play is it's always these guys are always going to regress to the mean of around 300. I do think to a certain degree pitchers can establish their own levels of that, but he doesn't end up delivering on that. And I think that he's a great example of a guy who doesn't necessarily fit the mold of just if you always subscribe to this theory. I mean, this guy who's always had a lot of trouble with walks. He's for the most part, he's been hittable. He's really inconsistent in his pitch selection, things like that. That it's kind of dangerous, I think, to put a lot of stock into just automatically assuming that this formula is going to work out for him. And just so again, I mean, it's an example. We try to put all these guys in context and try to get to understand some other things about them before we just automatically put them into this bucket of. This is the pool of 80% of players who are going to, succeed. And while we're not right on 20%, the other 80, we're happy with. And I think that we try to distinguish those guys even amongst the pool.
I don't know if you do a risk factor, but he does seem to kind of qualify as a guy that if you're willing to add risk to your team, he could be really valuable. And
yeah, exactly.
If you want some guy that's going to do exactly A, B, and C, he's probably not the guy you want to take.
Yeah, exactly. And we do a certain bit of risk evaluation, but I think he's a prime example of a guy who folks have just kind of ignored the risk, or the prices always seem to be forecasted to be a little greater. It doesn't take the risk completely into account, and I think that's something that we just automatically factor in.
But meanwhile, if you're a big Giants fan like I am, don't you think I'm justified in wanting to shoot Sabian for trading him for Melky Cabrera?
It's a head scratcher of a trade. I mean, it's kind of. I mean, this is to me. It's just a guy. I mean, he has all the talent in the world. I mean, he's phenomenal. A great fastball, a 93 to 95. I mean, I like his breaking stuff. I mean, it's really nasty. It's just obviously it's something that he doesn't always have great command. But a year ago, this guy was a top end trade commodity. I mean, a lot of teams wanted him, and it just seems like. It seems like Brian Sabian could take some lessons from even the most novice fantasy baseball owners and just realize that Dayton Moore was totally selling high there.
It does seem like a trade where you do the exact opposite of what we all tell fantasy players to do, which is, buy low and sell high. Instead, he's buying Melky after his one good year in 5 years, and trading Sanchez when his value is. Well, I don't think it was as low as Sabian got. I mean, his value was down, but even so, it just seems like, I wonder, did KC called him up and he was like in the mood to deal, so he said, "Oh, okay."
Exactly. That's almost, yeah. I mean, I agree completely that it's not even necessarily the case that his value had gone down all that much. At least, I mean, perceivably, it doesn't seem like it could have gone down that much. It's just it was a kind of an off year for him. I mean, he had pitched deep into the playoffs in the previous year, and you could kind of see that he had shown some signs of fatigue. So that was kind of a concern for me coming in to this season. It was another reason that I just, for instance, this past season, it was a great reason just to avoid taking on whatever perceivable upside there was with Sanchez, because there were a lot more things going into the risk for him this year. But I mean, having said that, I mean, the guy did have his 2010 didn't, once they display certain skills, they own them. I mean, he put that kind of season together. He's certainly capable of that kind of season again. I just, it's really surprising that Sabian would seem to think that little of him, at least, perceivably to me, because I mean, yeah, Cabrera is, does anybody anticipate this guy hitting 15, 17, 20 homers again, or, stealing 20-some bases again? I mean, this is phenomenal production for a guy who seemed to be, his ceiling seemed to be kind of a 10-20 kind of player.
Right. Well, he might steal 20 maybe, but, I think in real life that doesn't count nearly as much as it does in rotisserie. And since I run Scoresheet, which is a simulation, we don't have steal categories. So to me, if I'm a Scoresheet owner, I'm certainly not willing to trade Sanchez for Cabrera.
Yeah.
Probably what people care a little more about, though, is that Pujols guy. I care as a Giants fan more about Sanchez, and I'm happy to see Pujols leave the National League as a Giants fan. But 250, 260 million, what do you think about that?
It's a lot of dough, and it's a lot of dough at the back end of a contract that's, this guy's going to be 40, 41 years old at the end of this deal. Kind of as we alluded to off air, I mean, they have to win. They're going to have to win a couple of World Series at least, and it's probably going to have to happen in the next few years. That's, as you said, that for this to really pay off, because otherwise, I mean, you're talking about a guy who's going to be making, upwards of $25 million per year at the tail end of his career, and it just, even as inflation and other things, kind of come along, I mean, you can't possibly forecast that he's going to be earning that kind of money at that stage of his career. I think it's ludicrous. I mean, I think it was definitely a bad year for him as far as, the fact that the Bo Sox and the Yankees really had no need to acquire a player of his caliber. I mean, as far as his bank account, but besides that, I mean, I think it's an insane offer, and I think it's one of those that could potentially handicap a franchise. I mean, I think it's worth pursuing a player like that because of the impact he can make for your team, but you're paying for it in the long run potentially. And I think dollar for dollar, I think the C.J. Wilson move was just every bit as important, if not more important, to the Angels.
Because he was like $80 million.
Yeah,
so he's about a third the cost.
Yeah, $77.5 million, I think it was, for 5 years.
Yeah. I mean, every contract I can think of, it just reminds me of the Manny Ramirez when he signed with Boston, 8 years ago or so, and 2 years later, they put him on waivers, hoping somebody would pick him up for absolutely nothing just to get rid of the contract. And
yeah,
the Pujols is 31. There's always been those rumors he may be even really a little older, though. I think maybe with Homeland Security, the 31 is correct. But even at 31, even if that's right, 10 years from now, it seems more likely he's out of baseball than he's worth $30 million a year.
I think in this era of sports, I mean, we're talking about a sport who is, I mean, baseball and football. I mean, they've done a great deal more to crack down on performance-enhancing drugs, and I think we've seen the effects of that as far as how, the quality and the quantity of youth that is kind of infused Major League Baseball. I think it's kind of evident at this stage that players who are older just don't seem to last as long. It's just, for all the injuries that Pujols has kind of accumulated over the past few years, you can't help but start to think that those are eventually just really, they're gonna pile up and eventually take their toll on him. Probably won't be next year, probably won't be the year after that, but it won't be too far into the future before these things really start to affect just how much his body is able to hold up, and I think it's going to start breaking down.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, if you think you're really only going to get 5 or 6 good years out of him, which is still up to his 36, which, before Barry Bonds, people thought at 36 you were pretty much on your last legs as a baseball player. Bonds maybe changed that a little, though you alluded to the whole steroid crackdown has changed it back. So you might only get 5 years out of him. So if you get 5 good years out of him, you're paying him $50 million a year, which is, that's the payroll for a team like the A's.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just I think the kind of figures that you can put in comparison to it, I just think it's it's a great way to kind of ensure that you have a fantastic, you have a real bankable commodity and you have a draw. But beyond that, I just don't think it's a wise financial investment for the long term.
Yeah, well, on the other hand, I guess they've really done a pretty good job of making themselves a favorite for 2012. As you said, they got Wilson. They already had Herrera. They already had Weaver. They've got a guy like Irvin Santana as their fourth starter. That's pretty incredible pitching rotation. And with Pujols, they've got some hitting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a rotation that borderline. I mean, it's not going to generate the same kind of hype that the Phillies' a vaunted rotation of this past season did, but I mean, it's easily, I think, has the potential to deliver results that are better. I mean, obviously, Roy Oswalt missed a good portion of this past season and really was not a contributor to that at all. Cliff Lee, Roy Halladay, Cole Hamels, 3 outstanding pitchers. They all had fantastic seasons, but you're talking about 4 quality pitchers for the Angels, and these guys don't really have any health concerns. Irvin Santana is, I mean, he's a solid pitcher. He's not obviously not in those guys' classes, but I mean, he has phenomenal stuff. I think that he's got the ability to be close to their level, even though he's a little more inconsistent. I mean, who knows? I mean, he could have a breakthrough kind of season in the next couple of years and be, almost as good or just as good as these guys. I mean, it's a phenomenal rotation that they put together. I think that that's what makes them pretty scary contenders for anybody who comes into the playoffs. I mean, that's going to be really tough to beat. And Pujols, I think adding that to that lineup, if Kendrys Morales turns out to be healthy, if Mark Trumbo is able to play third base on a regular basis, I think that's asking a lot to me, but we'll see how that goes. I mean, they worked quite a bit with him, if I understand correctly, to improve his defense just at first base. But I mean, he turned out to be pretty above average, I would say, at first base over the course of the season. But it's a whole different animal playing third, so it's going to be interesting to see if he can make that transition at all. But I mean, they have some maneuverability. They've given themselves obviously an insane amount of depth. They have some aging pieces on that team already in the outfield, but they have Mike Trout coming up, so they're pretty set for the short term. I think it's safe to say.
Well, they got Trout is obviously 22 or so, and Abar, they're pretty young, short. The Trumbo, I don't know. I think seems like they could trade him to a team that needs a first baseman, like the Giants or somebody. Yeah, moving a first baseman to third base. I mean, 99% of the time the move is from third base to first base, not vice versa.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
But with the Rangers and the Angels, if, like we said, if you're a Seattle fan or an A's fan, you're kind of starting to feel, I think, like a Baltimore Orioles fan looking at the Yankees and the Red Sox. You got 2 teams that are just going to be awesome. You do have Houston coming to the AL West in another year, so that gives you a team to come in last.
Yeah, that's kind of the Orioles of the division here in a year. It's not a pretty picture, I think, for the A's and the Mariners, because I mean the Mariners had shown a willingness to maybe spend some money. I mean, they were the front runners for Prince Fielder at a time. The most unfortunate thing for them might be that in a year or two, this has already been something they talked about, is that they may be faced with the reality that they'll have to trade Felix Hernandez because they just can't afford to pay him and keep some of the other younger players around when their time comes. But for now, I mean, Felix Hernandez, Michael Pineda, Hultzen looks like the real deal. I mean, he's impressive, and there's a number of people that think he was easily the best pitcher available in that draft. And I think it's early on, it's hard to argue with that. So I mean, they have a lot of great young pieces. I mean, they really don't seem to have much in the way of bats. I mean, that's kind of the long-term thing, I guess, for them. And a Fielder signing, I think, might have given them a lot of hope and a lot of reason to believe that they were heading in the right direction there. Now it just seems like that'd be a move that'd be kind of futile at this point.
Yeah, I mean, they're not Baltimore, but maybe they're a little more like Toronto, who actually has a pretty good team. But with the unbalanced schedule, they're having to play the Yankees, Boston, Tampa Bay that much. It's hard for them to come in more than fourth place, better than fourth place, or even to win more than 80 games with the schedule. And Seattle's kind of, if the Rangers keep it up, maybe the Rangers will stumble a little bit, but they've got a pretty good core down there also.
Yeah, absolutely they do. I think that's. I mean, Nolan Ryan is he seems like a freaking genius down there. He's put together. I think the biggest thing, I mean, is just his kind of emphasis on just the development of pitching. He's kind of scrapped the idea, never bought into the philosophy that having his pitchers throw more often would be bad for them. Their pitchers probably throw on the side more than any other teams in baseball. And it's all about building up arm strength. And I think it's proven effective. I mean, they largely avoid injuries. These guys go 220, 230 innings or deep. I mean, they can. C.J. Wilson was a testament to that. I mean, he went 230 innings just 2 years after being a reliever. I mean, it's just, I think it's the combination of philosophy and the ability to identify talent down there is going to keep that team strong for a long time. And, I think it's really a testament to kind of the core personnel that Nolan Ryan and Rangers have put together in the front office.
Yeah. Well, and they seem to have a good enough revenue stream that they can afford to spend some money. So
yeah, absolutely.
The AL West is a far cry from where it was just a couple years ago when people were saying it was the worst division in baseball.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it'll be interesting. So Pujols, where do you think Fielder will end up now as a wild guess?
I guess I can't put it past Seattle to maybe try to step up and think that in order to make an impact in this division, they need to add a player like that. I mean, they seemed like they legitimately wanted him, but I guess there's a couple of teams that have talked about adding him at this stage. It's kind of at this point, it would be a bit of a romantic idea, but it would be nice to see Milwaukee be able to re-sign him. I think that. It's not. They have an opportunity to really take control of that division in the long run. They do have some solid talent over there, and the acquisition of, for instance, Zach Greinke last off season, they locked up Ricky Weeks. I mean, they have some good pieces over there. It'd be interesting to see if they could come up with the funds. It's kind of a bummer for them, perhaps, that K-Rod decided to accept arbitration. We'll see how that turns out. But I guess I wouldn't rule out Milwaukee. I think at this point, though, I mean, just because of the fact that Pujols has set the market. What he seemed to have set it at, I think it's going to be really difficult for them to get him back. I don't know if there's going to be the combination of teams that are really going to be able to buy for his services and even come close to offering kind of Pujols-like money. He's not going to command quite that much, but I mean, Florida's already kind of bowed out. I mean, this might be really a long drawn-out process. So I think it's really hard to get a feel for at this stage who wants him. I think the only ones you could really say are Seattle and Milwaukee.
Well, maybe the Cubs, though they're already saddled with some bad contracts. So,
yeah, I think that's the biggest roadblock to that. And I wouldn't rule them out if they can somehow unload any of that. I mean, they've talked about unloading Matt Garza too, and who knows what they get back in a package for him if they say that they're not actually floating him, but obviously nobody's untouchable. I think that they would do it in the right circumstance, but. Fielder would be a fantastic fit in Chicago. I think that's the kind of long-term commitment, relatively long-term commitment that would probably make a lot of sense for the Cubs. But I think the combination of bad deals, it just doesn't seem to me like they're in a position necessarily to start shelling out that kind of money just yet. But I guess at the same time, you have to strike while the iron's hot. And if Prince Fielder looks like the best commodity to become available in the next couple of years, maybe you go ahead and take a shot now and hope you can get rid of some of that other salary later.
Well, there's a pretty big drop-off from him to the next best the free agent market is not full of really star players this year. So,
yeah.
Maybe St. Louis, of course, now has a huge pile of money that we're willing to give to Pujols. I guess it's not out of the realm. They could say, well, gee, we'll sign Fielder and maybe we can get him for $150 million and we'll save $50, $60 million and have Fielder, which is not a bad backup option.
No, you can't call that a bad consolation prize.
Yeah.
It gives you an opportunity to go spend a little bit of money on pitching until these young pitching prospects that they have are ready to contribute. Shelby Miller here in a year could be an everyday member of that rotation, and with Adam Wainwright coming back and Chris Carpenter, they could still be considered viable World Series contenders. I think if they did add Fielder, so that's not it's not a bad place for him to end up.
No, I think if either one of the Cardinals or Milwaukee signed him, they would instantly become the front runner for the Central. And seems to me that's the only way you can justify these big salaries is if it really can put you over the top. If the Angels do win 2-3 World Series in the next 5 years, then they'll probably say it was worth the money. But you need to really have that signing put you over the top. Just kind of winning 88 games instead of 81 games there's no way you can justify spending that kind of money just to win a few more games.
Yeah, I agree, and that I mean, it's funny that you say that because I mean, that's kind of the way I look at what the Marlins have done. Is just I think it's kind of a confounding franchise to me because I mean they threw all that money at Jose Reyes, who's obviously we know. I mean, as fantasy players, we know he's a risky play. He's a risky guy to go after. You can't depend on him to stay healthy every year. You know, who knows? Maybe the heat of Florida, the humidity down there, maybe that helps him keep those hamstrings a little healthier. But I mean, I think you're asking a lot, and then I think not to be able to make like a high impact signing in addition to it, like a Pujols or a Fielder. I think to come up short there. I mean, I think it's to me, it's going to be awfully hard to sell to the fan base that this is like a team that's an instant contender. I mean, it's a solid team. I mean, I'm sure it will compete. You know, they could come in second place. I mean, they have this beautiful new stadium. It's they're hoping that this is a huge revenue generator. I mean, I think that you have to have the interest from the fans, and I think if you didn't make that kind of high impact signing like a Pujols or a Fielder, I think it's really going to be hard to sell to them that Mark Burley and Jose Reyes are going to be the guys who are instantly making this a big ticket team. So. I mean, you're talking about a lot of octogenarians down there in Miami. You're not really probably ready to spend most of their dollars on high price tickets to this new ballpark. I think it's just it just seems like a combination of things that makes this situation that's just kind of doomed to fail.
Yeah, like you said, I agree. I think it makes them a middling good team. And I don't know, Heath Bell, that's a lot of money for a closer that. You know, he's leaving one of the best pitcher parks there is in baseball. He showed declining skills last year. And the closers that have signed big contracts the last few years, I can't really think of any other than Mariano that have really lived up to the worth of the contract.
It's almost to me like I guess I almost dismiss such an investment in a closer. I mean, it's a lot of advanced metrics and things of that nature. I mean, they tend to kind of devalue relief pitchers, especially closers, and I think it's with good reason. I mean, you can come up with and you can patch together a low-price bullpen that can be just as good, if not the best, in your league. And I think that that kind of investment is really, I think it's kind of a short-sighted investment as far as what you're going to get in terms of a return for it. And I think that. I mean, there's a little bit of concern. I mean, Bell's kind of lost a little bit of velocity on his fastball. I mean, he didn't have the same kind of great strikeout rate that he's put up in years past. This past year, he's leaving a ballpark in Petco Park is obviously one of the 2-3 best parks to pitch in all of baseball. And we don't have data. We have no idea how to assess how this new stadium is going to play. But I mean, chances are it's not going to be as pitcher friendly as the Marlins' old stadium when they were still the Florida Marlins. I mean, what was that played like a pitcher's park for the most part, and I mean, it had about 87 different names, I think, from all the different sponsorship deals. To me, it's on par almost with the same in terms of the value. And I mean, I didn't see a great deal of reason for the Phillies to pony up so much money on Jonathan Papelbon when he wasn't, a closer is not necessarily their biggest need.
Yeah, to me, it's almost like somebody that's playing rotisserie is suddenly taking over the GM job. If you play roto where saves is a category, then getting some guy that saves 40 games a year is worth a lot of your auction dollars. But in real baseball, where you can plug in someone, or a score sheet, we allow you to use middle relievers or whatever as closers. So in score sheet, nobody drafts these guys very high or trades very much for them, because instead of trading a ton for Heath Bell or drafting him with a really high draft pick, like you said, you can pick up 3 guys in the middle rounds, and one of them will end up having a good year, and he can get 3 outs in the 9th inning just as well as somebody else.
There's a certain type of person, I guess. I mean, it does take a good bit of more mental fortitude to be able to succeed in the 9th inning, but I think it's a role that's in by one class of evaluators, it's kind of an overvalued position, and in another way it's a little undervalued. I mean, I think kind of a lot of things. The answer lies somewhere in the middle as far as what the value of a real closer is, but in terms of dollars and paying a closer double-digit millions of dollars per year, to me, is just kind of a waste of money.
Well, especially if it's 3 years. I mean, I think you can justify paying almost any amount if it's a 1-year contract or even 2. When you start signing closers for 25, 27, 30 million for 3 years, you might get the value this year, but once again, 3 years from now, there just aren't that many closers that 3 years in a row are that consistent.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, we'll see how it all plays out. So it's KFFL.com, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
All right, and then hopefully people will check you guys out, because you got your projection system comes out around the first of the year.
Yes, we're dropping our first big load of projections around the first of the year.
Hey, well, thanks very much for taking the time to talk to us, Nick. Appreciate it.
I really appreciate you having me on, Jeff. I mean, it's a fantastic game you run over there. I know these guys; they talk a lot about it. I love talking about it with Jeff Erickson and Laura Michaels. I mean, they blow me away with their depth of knowledge of the sport. So it's a fantastic talk baseball with you. I know it's a big thing over there for you, and appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, well, we'll do it again in a few weeks.
All right, sounds good.
All right, take care. Thanks, Nick.
You too.